right? We're here above all to be embodied in our own practice as care providers and to know how to lean into our own somatic support, our own felt sense. And that's number one always. And then once we have that, there's this beautiful side effect that our clients get to just feel that, but also we can bring it to them. So we can support them to be in their felt sense, to receive more of their own somatic support and embodied presence, whether it's through just co-regulating with us. It can be that simple. We're embodied, which can impact them and magnetize them to sink into their own bodies without having them do anything. And we can also offer them practices and activities and experiences and experiments to help them bring the cognitive into the somatic and vice versa. So we have all of these practices that we do together that we can bring to them as well. And I wanted to open it up today to ask you, what questions do you have? What curiosities do you have around somatic, around embodiment, around felt sense? We've talked a lot about what that means and about how it's a practice here. We look at it as a practice here and as a spectrum, and that it's something that I personally hold on a pedestal as a beautiful path to healing. It's just one path. It's a path I love. I think you do too, because you're here. But what questions come up around working with your own practice, around supporting your clients, around how you talk about it in the world, whatever, anything in regards to the word somatic? I have noticed it changes every time, and it changes depending on who I'm talking to and what the context of the conversation is. I wish I had a blanket statement. That was honestly the hardest part of going to school for somatic psychotherapy, figuring out how to come out of it, over a decade ago now, going, I'm in the world with this new degree and I have no idea how to tell people about it and talk about it. And I just feel very uncomfortable with this. And I don't know if what I would say has changed at all. I wish I could have told myself that back then. But how I would describe it is that when we can include in our awareness and be in touch with our felt sense, which I'll often start with, somatic doesn't mean sleep, because most people think when I say I'm a somatic psychotherapist, they think I mean I'm a sleep therapist. I say somatic means we include the awareness of our bodies in our healing. And our minds and bodies are not separate. So our thoughts are connected to the feelings we have in our bodies and our emotions, and vice versa. And so when we can be in touch with all the things that our body is carrying and speaking from the past and the present, we have a fast track to healing. We don't have to talk it out. We have all of the wisdom that we need right here and right now, because everything that we need is right here, held in our bodies in the present moment. And so when we can get in touch with our sensations, it's speaking to us all the time. It's speaking about what we need, what we don't need, what we want, what we don't want, where we've been, where we'd like to go. And so somatic practice is about listening to the language of our bodies, honoring it, and moving through our lives in connection with that as well. And I sure can resonate with, I don't know if you're exactly saying this, but this is my experience around, like, I don't have the scientific evidence and I'm not a doctor. So how do I talk about this in a way that it sounds really legitimate? Because I know in my heart of hearts and like my direct experience that there's truth here. And so it's so important when we can share this. So many people don't know it. So the kidneys, the adrenals, the gut, those are the first things that get taxed. They get activated, they get lit up as soon as there's any perception of harm or threat or actual threat. So when our kidneys, our adrenals, and our gut go into well, what happens is the kidneys and adrenals go into overdrive to help us get away from the threat. The gut shuts down because we don't exactly need to be digesting food when we're running from a cougar, for example.
Mhm.
And sometimes the body gets stuck in that experience, thinking the threat is still here. Sometimes that can happen for many decades. And so the gut continues to be shut down, and the kidneys and adrenals continue to be working on overdrive, thinking a threat is still here, trying to take care of us. And so, what happens when the gut shuts down and the kidneys and adrenals are working on overdrive? The immune function goes down, our thyroids get taxed, our hormonal systems become really imbalanced, trying to keep up with the load that the body is still carrying, thinking the threat is still present, or maybe the threat is still present, right? So to me, it's really obvious. It's like, oh yeah, how could cancer not arise from such a taxed system? How could chronic illness and chronic pain not be here when the body is under such an incredible load, thinking there's still a threat present, not having fully come back into resource and presence? The other thing I'd say and think about is the hundreds and hundreds of people I've worked with cancer and chronic pain and chronic fatigue. Almost every single one of them, me included, had a majorly difficult time setting boundaries. They all had a big history of people pleasing, caretaking, and overgiving, and feeling like they would die if they said no. And so there is a real direct correlation in my direct experience of what I have seen in my own health and the people I work with. The more they learn how to set boundaries, stop overgiving, figure out how to give to themselves, receive, health starts changing immediately when they feel safe enough to say no and to receive. So those are two things I think about a lot and talk about a lot, because I think a lot of people can really resonate and wrap their minds around that. Add to that is, so when we talk to clients about these things, we have to be very mindful, because we don't want them to blame themselves. Oh my gosh, I gave myself cancer because I can't say no. And they'll go into a whole nother trauma response. And so we introduce these things really, really gently, of like, this is a cultural epidemic. This is what happened for folks in marginalized populations or people socialized as women, or, we had introduced it as something that is like an ongoing cultural trauma, not something that they did to themselves, right? We don't want to add that. It helps us sit in our hearts more around why we get so frustrated, why our clients can't set boundaries. It's like, okay, we're going to offer so much care here and go real slow, because it brings up so much for them. I mean, somatic work is perfect for this, because the realization that nothing is ever final, right? There's no pretty bow ever. Life is always going to ebb and flow and change and be shifting and unfolding, and we're never going to be able to completely avoid pain and suffering. And so when we can sit in the felt sense of our resilience, of our wholeness, of our steadiness, and we have this whole body resourcing us so that we can meet our corporate life, we can meet all those people out there that are not connected or present in a way we maybe want to be, or we can meet our healing process that isn't complete. It's the same when we're in that wide open space of steadiness and resilience and wholeness, and sitting in it, in our bodies connected to earth and all the things supporting us. We're so powerful, right? We're not expecting things to be pretty and final and complete. We're able to allow every wave to come with more spaciousness. And then we're also able to allow it when it doesn't, because it's not like we're perfectly enlightened and free all of the time. Um, Being able to have steadiness and embodiment means sometimes we're very human and really messy, right? And so the reason I love somatics is because it gives us so much more surface area to hold it all, right? And we are of the earth, we become the earth, we are that steadiness. And when we're just working cognitively, there's so many things that's beautiful about working cognitively at all. But for me, somatics is slower and wider. And so uh, it just holds things in a longer term, more spacious way for me, maybe not everyone. And so when we're connected to our bodies, we also might leave that corporate job over time, and we might choose new friends because we're listening to the signals more clearly and we have more access to what we'd really love to have happen. And we can make choices and be in discernment from that place. Absolutely. Yeah, I love the inquiry there. And discernment is the key word, right? It's like, am I trying to move out of something, towards something, or away from something? Practices that are movement based or that just move a lot of energy, right? And we do feel better. And we have to discern, is this going to help me feel better right now for the next 15 minutes? Or is this, going to take me out of something that could help me feel better over the long term? And sometimes it's both. Sometimes we need to move a little and then sit still for a little while. I think a lot about my original Buddhist practice, which is a Vajrayana Tibetan practice. And it validated everything for me around this, because the way I was taught to practice in that tradition is we chant first, and we're chanting to meet the mind where it's at, because the mind is up here and it's going quickly. And so the more we can chant, we're coming up, we're saying hello to it. And then, like you probably noticed in the humming, once we are in that state connected and have met the mind, afterwards, there's more space to go, and what's here now? And for a lot of us, me as a neurodiverse person, really need movement before stillness a lot of the time. Otherwise, it's just too much activation, too much energy to manage. And so there is no right or wrong way. There is what works for your system and what supports it. And so we have to look at what's skillful and what's not. And we can look at what's in the window of tolerance. So I used to be pretty addicted to doing really intense breathwork practices where I go hard and fast and I'd move a ton of emotion and I would feel so much better at the end. But I didn't feel better the next day or the next week because I was just moving the energy around. I wasn't actually embracing what was there, even though it kind of felt like it at the time. But for me, I was just kind of off gassing it so that I could breathe a little bit better for a little while. And so now what I do is I do a more gentle breath work practice to get that movement. And then I will really make sure I go into the stillness and savor what wants tending. And that works for me. But it's, different for everyone, right? Bottom line in terms of our approach here is we never make anything wrong. It's like, oh, here's a great space to just inquire around, what am I doing? And is this supportive and skillful for what I want right now in terms of my healing and my connection with myself?